Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey kids, how is everybody? I say kids because I'm kind of older than God now. Maybe not quite that old, but I am old enough to remember a few things. But I tell you what, the story that we're going to be revealing tonight spans not only century, but even millennia. So I'm not old enough to remember the beginning of that story, but I am old enough to remember the year 1971. And that's where my guest's story begins tonight. But any of you guys old enough to remember 1971? Some of the things that we were doing back then, the movies that we were watching, The Last Picture Show, The French Connection, Fiddler on the Roof. Those were some of the biggies and award winners. Clockwork Orange, well, that was a big one. And then, of course, we were listening to The Doors and Dylan and The Who and John Lennon and everybody from Mungo Jerry to Ike and Tina Turner. And then, of course, the TV shows that were very popular at the time were shows like Mary Tyler Moore and The Partridge Family. I'm sure we all remember those, if we're old enough, that is. But anyhow, it was an interesting time, but it was still 4 years to go on the Vietnam War in 1971. And our story begins with someone who was protecting our country in the Vietnam War, and that is my guest's brother, and we're going to talk about him right now and so much more. My guest tonight is James Arthur Becker. He is the author, along with Kenneth Bauman, of The Suppression of Our Founding History. And if you're wondering how this connects to 1971, well, believe me, it does. But it's pretty wild. So, James Becker, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm really excited to get into this material.
Yes. I'm very anxious to impart it to you. This important history was started by my ancestor, Jacob Becker. And we didn't know much about him as a Revolutionary War hero, but my brother got called in by Richard Nixon to sign an amendment to the secret treaty number 1.
But let's just stop right there. Your brother was only 18 years old or something at the time?
He was actually about a week shy of 21.
Oh my goodness. And so you said he had just returned from Vietnam, or?
He had just returned from Vietnam.
And
it's much earlier.
It's interesting to note that, and thank you for your service, by the way. It's interesting to note that he was in intelligence for the armed forces.
He ended up linked into Army intelligence, which is a very special group. It only works for Congress.
But he probably had no idea when he was called in, I'm assuming. I'm sure he thought it had something to do with his intelligence work or something like that. So he was called in.
He was called in because he wanted him to sign a document that was originated by my ancestor. It's a document that was signed by the entire delegates for the Continental Congress on July 4, 1761. It's called Secret Treaty Number 1. You have 3 provisions passed and so listed in the Continental Journal of Continental Congress that show you the timeline of what's happening and preparing things for the meeting of that ended up on July 4th. And in that 3-day meeting, they're preparing one of the things as a secret treaty. It was passed in a special resolution on the 11th of June, 1776, that a treaty would be prepared for them to sign with foreign powers.
And who was that treaty among? What powers were party to that?
And so nobody ever really thinks, well, what happened? Because it became a secret treaty, it was never divulged. It was so important. And that's one of the things that's really unique about it.
You know, something that popped into my head just before we were going on the air was, I believe it was 1971 when the Pentagon Papers were made public. And
that's correct.
That was regarding, and I could be wrong about this, but to me it was regarding some secret military actions that had been taken on behalf of the United States that were pretty bad. And the American public came away feeling that they had been misled by the government, and that, already there was mixed sentiments about the Vietnam War. And they really turned, I think, around that time. Was there a connection at all with that and the Federalist Papers?
Yes, well, there's a connection, but the Federalist Papers are a separate situation. The Federalist Papers were initiated for the people who attended the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention. They all had to comply with the Federalist Papers, which meant that they could not talk to anyone. They were sworn not to talk to anyone about what they learned at the convention. They could write up an article, and that article would be then screened. And what they were screening it for was to make sure that they didn't say anything about what they weren't supposed to say anything about. And what it was, the big secret is the concept that we had more gold than the British had. And we were presented with that much gold. And it was gold coming in from the Knights Templar treasure. And so presented to Congress on the and signed for on the 4th of July, 1776.
But who was it that bestowed this treasure on the United States?
My ancestor brought it across. It took 10 ships to get it in here. It's a lot of gold, very heavy. And there was 10 ships involved. And the people who were in charge of each ship were called money runners. And they brought in this gold, and it was hidden, and it became a vault cash to the issuance of the Continental Dollar.
So this gold, because you also mentioned,
you have the enemy taking it away from you.
Right. But you mentioned, the Templars and the, Templar treasure. Does this include items from Jerusalem, from the Temple of Solomon?
Yes. The Knights Templar treasure consisted, at that point when we talk about it, consisted of the treasure that they had made in Europe, earned in Europe from trade and things that they were, economic things that they did, had added to it. But it mainly consisted of the King Solomon's treasure, which was let 5,000 years ago for a special purpose, and therefore it was covered with secrecy and handled very secretly all that time. You've seen a lot of stuff on Oak Island and so forth, and you know that some of the mysteries of it coming to America. And then effectively was ended this way.
What was the special purpose? Was this, did they have designs on building a new Jerusalem, a new temple?
No, the design was to build a new temple, but the new temple was based on the removal of the one that had been built by King Solomon, because it was foreseeing that it would be subject to being torn down by invading enemies, which it was. And that knowing that as a vision and operating on it as a vision King Solomon set this up. This goes back over 3,000 years ago.
Absolutely.
And it was held quietly. The treasure was all transferred to the Temple Mount. There was an area in the Temple Mount which was secure, and they managed to use that as the vault. They secured King David's gold, King Solomon's gold, and other treasures that he wanted to bestow upon us as a new nation, which were some of the temples from the temple, and a whole set of scrolls that were sent and then ended up in Europe by the Knights Templars. But those special scrolls had knowledge in them, and he had recorded those. They were translated, and quietly the intellectual information was made known. That is the reason for the sudden outcropping of intelligence in the Middle Ages, ending them with the Enlightenment period. And that whole Enlightenment was fed by the papers, but they had to be very careful because they didn't want to give away where the gold was located at that time.
And what kind of information did they want to get out at that time?
They wanted to get out, at that time, information to go forward and head everybody toward the new world, the Promised Land. And the Promised Land is talked about early. You can find portions of it in the writings of Josephus, which were in the 1st century and he wrote about after he got captured and taken to Rome. He wrote about the business of the history of the Jews. He wrote 2 books. In the history of the Jews, he talks about the 3 groups that are important: the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes. And the Essenes are, otherwise, you can read the entire Bible. You will find their name in there.
That's right.
It's a very big group.
Very interesting group. I mean, of course, we know them from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
That's right.
But, before we get yeah, absolutely. Before we get too far into this, can we go back then? So your brother gets called in. He has to sign this document. He sees information about your family, including current members of your family.
We were keeping current information in that file of our family.
And so that prompts him.
He said he was sitting there and he saw my 201 file sitting there. And he said, "Jim, it was taken out on your birthday, the day you were born."
That's crazy.
Because the start date on those files is always on the file cover.
And so, in your mind, is it because of the familial connection with your ancestor that, I mean, is it just the idea that this information is passed down through families and that there's certain ownership that is due certain people? Or is there something to
carefully spread down through the generations, and there's outcroppings of people who had that information? One of the people who had that information and kind of confirms it in the materials that he wrote was Sir Francis.
Francis Bacon.
Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
And Bacon had written, of course, about Atlantis, and when he wrote about it, it was a mythical thing that he wrote about. But that's the future. He's looking at the United States, and people who see that book today and read it are amazed at what's he really talking about. This is supposed to be a special place. It is. It's supposed to be a special place.
Now, do you, I know, we talk about, these certain family lines, and we sometimes call them bloodline families. And these families purportedly go right back to the bloodline of Jesus, and the Merovingian line.
The Merovingian line, right.
And so is it your, do you agree that that Merovingian line is part of the bloodline of Jesus? Or do you think...
I would say it is best they've been able to relate it, especially when you read about the fall of Mount Segur, which was on March 16, 1244.
1244, that's right.
And it was the night before it fell. The people who were the bloodline escaped and went somewhere.
Right.
But the thing was, when they went back to fight the next day, these people actually ran into their own funeral fires in celebration. Everything was going to be
right.
Okay. They knew it was going to be. So it's a very unique religious element.
Well, yes, I've actually been to Montsegur on that date. Been there a few times, but and climbed it only once, and I probably won't do that again. The older I get, the harder it gets. But it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And for those who don't know the story, we're talking about the people known as the Cathars, or the good men and women that were basically called Christian heretics by the Roman Church at the time. And this was all during the time...
Recently, there was a new book that came out on the Templars that had been put out by the Catholic Church. And Pope John Paul II, did an exemplary job of having that book written, and it contains the papal bull that shows the special relationship that the Catholic Church took ownership of what the Knights Templar were trying to do, and gave them special protection and sent special priests to communicate with them.
Now, I did know, I think it was last year, maybe.
That actual paper has now was printed while he was alive, but it's a remarkable thing because it gets rid of the secrecy. I do think that a lot of the things that happened then with the French king, there was a period where they were attacking, trying to get the gold, because the new gold came back. If you go to Eleanor of Aquitaine, she and her husband, the King of France, went to the Holy Land. Well, he knew about the gold being moved, and he did some inappropriate things, and I think this is why his bloodline runs out. She divorces him and marries another man who becomes King of England.
Yeah, she does. She was quite a lady. She was very powerful. But yes, and so, the Cathars were basically surrounded by the Inquisition army. This was all during the Albigensian Crusade. And they negotiated with the army to allow them a few days in order to perform a particular ceremony or service. And then they said that they would come peacefully down the hill. So that's exactly what happened. And you're right, there were some escapees. And it was said, or at least I've heard, that there were 3 people that escaped and went off in 3 different directions with the so-called Cathar treasure. But the Cathar treasure could have been themselves. It could have been the bloodline. Or maybe it's documents.
But I do think one of the things that's unique about that is that whole group of people who escaped. Jacob Becker, we pick him up just before the start of the revolution, and he is in the Berlin ghetto.
And this is your ancestor, Jacob Becker.
He's the one that wrote the treaty and signed for the foreign powers. So it's him now, Congress setting that up. He wrote that treaty.
When your brother, did he call you on the phone or did he come and see you with this information?
Well, he came and saw us later afterwards. He came and saw myself and our father. We sat down and had some nice long sessions about it.
And what was his thoughts on it at the time? What was his frame of mind? He was just super curious, or what?
Well, he got leaned on by Nixon. He wanted more information, especially when he realized that he was connected with the assassinations investigation.
And what assassination?
The assassinations commission that was running in the 70s in that period.
Oh, the Warren Commission?
Well, it was started with the Warren Commission. It started with the JFK incident, but it continued, and they looked at all of the assassinations and the whole subject of assassination. Congress did. And in that process, he was involved, and that's when he got involved with lead them into the Watergate Hotel. And
the old Watergate scandal. The old Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist and everything else.
Right. Well, people don't know that when we had a president back then who should have stood trial for some of the things that he did, and instead we let him escape with a pardon.
Well, I mean, that's kind of
people were damaged, and this has never allowed some of this to come out.
It's kind of interesting that we're talking about this at this time because this is a controversial subject right now. But it is interesting to look back at what happened through history, and realize that what we're going through right now. We've been through some things before.
Learned about the existence of Deep Throat. He had to talk to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And Deep Throat just came out a year or two ago, or I don't know. It seems recent anyway to me. Was finally identified.
The thing about it is, the first time that was suggested as him being the Deep Throat, it was denied by Bernstein and Woodward. But the second time that it finally was pushed at him, and the lawyer representing Deep Throat, who was the assistant FBI director.
Yes.
He wasn't a little guy.
I know.
So you had people that were really important and wanted things to happen.
Yeah.
And Nixon was out of line, and there were things that he was doing, and Larry had gotten involved in some of them, and he was asked to come up with a plan. Well, how do you catch a president? And this was how it was done.
How do you catch a president?
How do you catch a president? Yeah.
You mean in wrongdoing?
In wrongdoing, right. It's a
real
real
see.
problem.
Yeah, it's almost impossible, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Honestly, I think going forward, I don't care who the president is. I don't like that. I don't like that anyone is above the law. I don't care whether they're a Democrat, Republican, or a Martian. It just doesn't seem right. And,
this is what drove my brother, and this is why on August 9th, 1974, when Nixon is stepping down, he's talking about the person that hates him. He just sees it that way. That's how he can describe my brother.
The person that hates him?
Yeah. A person who hates him.
Oh, my goodness.
My personality doesn't understand that if you do something that's really bad, people are really concerned about it. So a lot of the things that Nixon had done has never been uncovered.
So in some ways, not in a super public way, but certainly internally. Could could we say that your brother was kind of a whistleblower?
Yes.
That's
He was a
interesting.
whistleblower. He
Wow.
definitely was.
And so
And he was tied up officially a different way, and they were trying to take advantage of him.
and who did he blow the whistle to? He went to Deep Throat?
He went to Deep Throat because he was approached by another person because Nixon had his campaign committee, and Larry had gone to Kemper Military School, which is a high school in Missouri. It's no longer there, but when he was out there at Kemper, one of the people that he had been in school with had been picked by his father. His father was quite wealthy, to go and make a deposit for Nixon's reelection, and it was to be made in Mexico City. And the people who would deliver that were supposed to be expendable. The father didn't read that, so the son got down there. Then he started to figure it out, and he knew he was a goner.
Oh,
so he turns around and gets hold of the jailer, and he says, "Hey, would you like to make a lot of money?" And the jailer manages to go in and contact his father, and his father then contacts Kemper. And he says, "I need some help. I don't know who else I can turn to." He says, "Here, I was helping the president, and lo and behold, I give him money away here and to support him, and this is what's happening." So that's when Larry got called in. So that's why Larry was talking to Deep Throat, and Deep Throat talked about following the money. That's following
Yep.
what's going on with the money.
Follow the money.
And that's the money. And this is the advice that he was given. And
Now, your brother.
He found another student that they both knew, who had attended Kemper, who was a citizen of Panama. And that's the fellow who went in and freed the Kemper boy that was hostage down there as a bagman for the money for the campaign committee.
Wow. Well, that was
Mitchell was not a very good guy. He was in charge of that campaign.
Yeah. It sounds like there was a lot of ugliness going on underneath the surface. I mean, we saw some of it.
Came out, but anybody who got involved in that, but what they were doing. They wanted a group of people who were going to be qualified quietly for zero interest.
Wow.
And that's what they were giving out. They were giving out the privilege for zero interest. They'd found someone who had a zero interest. And that person who had a zero interest was Jacob Becker. Because Jacob bought all of the unsold lands of William Penn. And the William Penn land grant came with a zero tax. And that's another separate story, but it's most interesting, and that's what they were doing. And then if you have someone who has got a zero tax, they don't want to talk about it because they take it before a judge, and a judge renders a decision, and the decision is then covered by secrecy because it becomes a sealed decision. And so you have a judge who can get paid for a sealed decision. And this is the kind of business they were in.
So this is what was going on back then. You know, James, this is probably a good time to mention to our listeners that they are listening to Night Vision Radio, and we're on KGRA. My guest tonight is James Becker, and we're talking about some scary stuff, you know, about our U.S. history, but also with history that goes back millennia. It's all connected. It's mind-boggling, and that's why there's so much information. I wanted to direct everyone to Amazon to pick up a copy of your book. It's called "The Suppression of Our Founding History" by James Becker and Kenneth Bauman. And there's so much information to get through. There's no way that we'll be able to cover it in the next half hour or a little bit less that we have in this show. But I wanted to direct everyone to follow up on this story, and you can get all the information there. And I have a feeling this story is kind of still evolving. Is that true?
I think it still is. I think it really is. I think there's more pieces falling in place all the time.
And it seems to be now. I know that there are certain things. History.
You were talking about one of the instances that's fallen into place when you started talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
The Dead Sea Scrolls didn't exist before 1948, as far as we knew.
Right.
They were there all along.
Right. And, yeah. A friend of mine, Professor Robert Eisenman, was the guy that went over and snuck out secret photographs of the Dead Sea Scrolls and released them. And that's how they became public. And, of course, he was banned from going back to Israel for several years, but they welcome him back now with open arms. But that was quite a story. They had them for quite some time, but they didn't release what was in them. They didn't release photos of them so that, the world's translators could have at them and see what we had there. But they did some really interesting translating on those. They divided them up into just phrases and words, and then they reassembled them so that people wouldn't necessarily put their own angle on them. So they'd just be translating a few words. So, they wouldn't really know what the subject was. So that was really interesting. But yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which of course were Essene scrolls. And we kind of now know, or at least, some people know, and I believe that was the sect that Jesus was a part of, the Essenes. And very, very interesting group, wonderful philosophy. The Essenes had very peaceful and wonderful people. But now, when your brother came back, he told you and your dad, what is the next thing that you did? Did you say, oh, I got to find out more about this? Or did you, I know your brother spoke with the one gentleman, but was there anyone else that you contacted? Or how did you start on your journey to dig into this stuff?
Well, I was aided by his knowledge for quite some time. Unfortunately, he died in an automobile accident in 1988.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But the thing about it was, after that, I began to continue to look for more and more data. And as I got into it, I found more. For example, I had a situation where I was looking for material that might be in the National Archives. Knowing what he had found, I wanted to find out what else they might have, and I ended up hiring a professional investigator to go in. And they were really turned out to be very inexpensive for what they did for me. But it was a situation where I was very pleased with what they were able to do. They went in and found out that there was a problem. I can send you some more things that are of interest. They found an entire file cabinet that was full of nothing but 1939 news articles out of Philadelphia. And there was a very big financial case about a lost treasure that belonged to Jacob Becker, and it was identified as either Jacob Becker or Jacob Baker. They couldn't tell which, but they were sure that that this had it sparked a 1933 sale of papers to allow one to grab hold of the unclaimed treasure, and they were attempting to claim this treasure from these papers, and it ends up being a $2 million loss of funds from people who are taken advantage of. And $2 million back then, and during the middle of a depression, it's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And you're talking about most likely the group that originally had Jacob Becker's money in front of them and knew about it were a group of people who were associated with the Philadelphia Bank. And that he had an account there. There was actually a trust account, and he had left them with special information as to when to contact the family. He was burnt out of his Pennsylvania home in 1832 by the opposition that he found from Henry Clay. Henry Clay was pro-slavery. He had been fighting against slavery right from the very start, and he won little battles and won a number of things. There's a number of things that came along which were accomplishments, and he wasn't the type of person that did something that had it claimed in his name. Didn't have to. It wasn't ego about it. For example, in 1785, you find the Northwest Territories being picked up. That was a decision to pick up what would become 6 states. And when they were picked up as non-slave. And,
as non-slave.
Pardon?
Did you say non-slave?
Non-slave, right. The Northwest Territories could never become slave. You couldn't take slaves into them.
Mm-hmm.
And this was part of this thinking to how do I stop it? Later he was involved with another ruckus, the Missouri Compromise.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed attached and stayed informed, and he had been part of. Well, in fact, I think one of the things we were going to talk about was his involvement with the actual U.S. Constitution.
Right.
He got involved with that, and in fact, he at the last minute they pulled some people in. After the Continental Congress or the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention kind of ran to a point where it was no longer any more productive than the Annapolis. They were kind of stuck in the same kind of mud. They had to do something to straighten it out. So he was picked up and asked to go in and explain what was needed to get this thing put together. He told them what they needed, and things like census. Census were used a long time ago when you had the 12 tribes of Israel together. Census is you find it talked about in Numbers. It's a very old biblical concept. And this is partly, he explained to them what he wanted to do and how he was going to use a census. And with the time he was done, they said, hey, you better be president. We don't want to miss this. We want to get it right. And it's pretty complicated. So there's a part of the U.S. Constitution that's known as the signing block. And that signing block is awfully important that way. And I'll pull it up here. I've got it so I can better explain it.
What do you mean by signing block?
It's a particular section of the Constitution. If you pull it up right now, it's, let me see.
You mean where the signatures are?
No.
Oh.
It's hidden in the text.
Oh, I see.
But it's actually in the text, and that's what makes it so different, because it's going to tell you where it's at. My problem here, I can get the right paper in front of me.
Why is it so important, that section?
It's important because people start off and say, well, no foreigner can be. He was a foreigner.
Oh, that's right.
And when you get to that part of it, it talks about what he is allowed to do, and it just gives some really it's article in the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, and it reads, no person except a natural-born citizen, comma, or, that or is very important, or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president.
So in other words, that just encompassed that one guy, basically.
Right.
And then forever after.
And talks about them being a resident of 14 years, which counts for the amount of time that he came here. He came here and was actually in attendance at the First Continental Congress.
Wow.
And made a trip back and came back. So he's been involved for quite some time. And so he had them at the point where they said, okay, you've got something that's very complicated. We don't want you to not be able to be. And he said, well, and this is how he worded it. So he was able to come along later and talk George Washington into taking his place. And when Washington took his place, Washington's first election into office is the only time you've ever had someone unanimously picked for president.
Wow. You know, you sort of talked about, how you found out how this relates to, the treasures of the Temple of Solomon and all that. But how does Nixon figure into all this? I mean, what is his part?
His part was he became very aggrandizing in terms of he was Mr. Powerful. He should have taken things like this business of coming off the gold standard. He didn't give anybody else a chance to even look at it. He was doing what he wanted done. It's not really been looked at, and from the standpoint of how is this going to affect the country? What are we trying to tell everybody? He's just making up his mind, shooting from the hip.
Mm.
There was no thought going into it. For example, Larry stopped at that point where just before he was to sign, and he says, look, I'm not going to sign this if you do not agree to maintain us on an equal trade balance. We've got to have a trade balance. And he agreed. Oh, yeah. And, of course, he had nothing, it meant nothing from him. He gave it no thought. I don't believe he was really capable of understanding what he was doing.
Mm.
You affect so many other people sometimes with your decisions. You've got to, if you're going to do something in government, you've got to take your time and be very careful about what you're doing. There's so many people affected.
Yes, and so many things connected. It's like you move one piece and something's messed up way over here. So you've got to take all those balances into consideration.
This is so important to us, and I think we just don't appreciate it. It's just like having somebody get up and say, I'm a good guy because I don't raise taxes. And then you have somebody get up and try and pay the bill, and you beat him over the head because he raised tax. I mean, we've not done this in a logical fashion. We've
right.
done it with the care that it really needs to be done with. And this is how we need to go forward, with a lot more concern, a lot more care, and getting all the things we can get together and carefully moving things in a careful direction.
Keeping all our ducks in a row, I guess. Now, going forward, what is your plan to do with this information, and what implications do you think that it has for us today? Is there something?
I think it's really important because I think that one, for example, one of the things that's totally not understood is the relationship of King Solomon. The Bible tells us that he was the wisest man that ever lived. And we kind of scoff at it. Wow, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's me, you know. And this is just the kind of thing that gets people off on the wrong track. And I think this is one of the things that has to happen. We have to start to really measure what we're doing and attempt to do it in the correct way. And I think there's a lot of this that we take for granted, and we really don't know who to thank sometimes.
Do you think that, that the capitalist society has caused a problem? Do you think that because of the way that things went down over time, that it's caused society in general to be, and capitalism is good, but maybe materialistic?
I started out to be an economist when I went to Ohio State years ago. And I took, one of the things I was trying to figure out was what the other guys, how they were handling themselves and what it was all about, and just what was good and bad about it. I think the concept is good. I think as we apply it, it has to be carefully applied. I think we have gotten ourselves into an awful lot of trouble with the invention of corporations.
Mm.
And I think that we ought to rethink that whole thing. I think that right now you've got a situation where states pretty much control corporations. And
right.
States they'll start in California or even here in North Carolina, and next thing you know, they're registered in Delaware and go from there to overseas somewhere. And you have a concept where you're letting it go to the world, and you're getting this, I am in charge of the world. You've got to give me control of digital money now. I mean, you have some things that are being said that need to come back and need to be looked at a little more carefully, and we need to set up more carefully what we're doing. And I do believe that we all ought to have a chance at the low interest. It doesn't belong to just the way they've got it set up. I think
something is messed up. It's all slanted and terribly unequal. But I wonder what you said this treaty was with these foreign powers. And do you imagine that it's European powers?
Well, I'll tell you, they were the people who were indoctrinated with the Essene concepts that come down to them, that had given them the tradition of this is what's important. They were informed on things that other people weren't informed on. That also gave them the responsibility of making it work. And they took their time and figured it out and made it work. I think it's amazing what they've been able to reveal to us in terms of the care in which the Knights Templar went down and formed, and how they carefully managed to bring all of that back to Europe.
Right.
And they're just beginning. I mean, you're seeing more and more movies even come out on it. They're scratching their head and saying, well, how did this hell happen, huh? And I think that they fail to understand that people can work that way. And I think that a lot of this was handed down in families. And I think they were careful who they picked to do these things. I believe that they were more oriented toward a concept of finding out who really had the patience to behave and do what they was needed and understand. And those who didn't have the ability to, but just to look after themselves, they did not qualify for handing them a lot of responsibility because it wasn't going to end up well. And I think there was an awful lot of that went on quietly and was never talked about. But if you had something important to pass out to one of your family members, how did you figure that out? That's one of the things that really surprised me in terms of how did Jacob manage to be the person that got picked to do these things.
Exactly. And this information's been kept secret, for a long, long time.
Oh,
do you know if there was ever a plan to reveal the information? Or do you think they were relying on someone like you that was going to...
They must have been relying on somebody like me, because I think this is where it was interesting, was when Larry would sit down with myself and my father. He was a Knights Templar. He had gone through not only the Masonic Order, which I've gone through, and Larry had gone through, or did go through, and the Scottish Rite, but the Knights Templar were the original people who really kept this thing together, who came out and brought their existence out of Jerusalem to us. And they are a group that had a special knowledge and special way of doing things. And they were very ordered, and they were very, very much people who were concerned about, I respect what God wants, and I want to do it the right way.
Yeah.
They went out of their way to find it.
Now, surely there must have been some danger involved. I mean, certainly if, a secret of this kind, it's actually many secrets, but of this magnitude, certainly there must have been some danger in revealing it. Do you feel like there's a danger now?
No, none that I'll put it this way. When my brother and I sat down with our father and we went through this, Dad would stop and finish Larry's sentence. Now, his sentences were structured, and what he knew was structured from a portion in the Knights Templar ritual that is given to the candidate going through, so he knows what's going on and is a little better informed. But that portion was open and actually to you and me in that treaty. And I think that treaty is very important for it to be the revelation to us of what's going on.
Wow. Well, that is quite amazing. So what's the next step for you?
I'm trying to get people to listen a little bit to the story, and I've also stopped and talked with several of my friends who have gone through Knights Templar. And I get a very interesting reaction from them. They realize that something really kind of needs to be done, but you want to remember that nobody grabs the horns of this and says they're in charge, because nobody is.
Right.
You can't say that one person is in charge of it. It's not that kind of an organization.
Right.
It doesn't submit to that. And therefore it's different. And it has a special reverence to it that other things don't have. And that's the one beauty of it.
Right. Well, it's an amazing amount of information. I haven't got my head around all of it yet. So I'm going to have to pour through that book a little bit more and absorb all of it, because there's just so many connections. And
I've spent an awful lot of time looking at how did they do this, or why did they do that, and then I find some things that were done historically that stand out, and you really have to scratch your head and look at how carefully And an awful lot of people put an awful lot into this.
Right.
And it's just, it's something that belongs to all of us, not just one.
Well, that sounds right.
It's one of those things that you would hope that the mankind would decide to stop and take a look at. I really have fears that when Nixon left, on the 9th of August, and I think it was 1974, when he left the White House, recently Bernstein and Woodward have talked about there being a number of old documents that were torn up, or appeared to be torn up around.
Oh, my goodness. You know what? I've gotten so involved in this, I didn't realize that Producer Bill has given me the signal that our time is all up. I'm so sorry, James. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. You're going to have to come back one of these days and finish up. And I hope everyone has a wonderful, happy, albeit weird Thanksgiving this year. Next week, join me. Gloria Amendola is going to be here. We're going to be talking about oracles, mystics, and psychics through the ages. Please join us. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Stay safe. Stay healthy.